They told us Peleliu would be over in 3 days. 70 days later, half my platoon was dead. And some nights, I still hear the screams coming from that island. The sun hit us like a hammer when we landed. The coral sand reflected the light until it felt like we were walking across glass. Every breath burned my lungs, heavy with the smell of salt, gunpowder, and something sour I couldn't name at first. Later, I realized it was the stench of bodies, Japanese and American both, already rotting under the heat. The first hours blurred. Mortar fire rained down on us from caves we couldn't even see, machine guns cutting into men I joked with on the transport just the night before. Someone yelled that we were pushing inland, that we had to reach the airfield. But the airfield wasn't what haunted me. It was the caves. You see, the Japanese had built tunnels and bunkers all across the island, carving into the limestone itself. We thought we'd flush them out fast, like we'd done on other islands. But Peleliu wasn't like other islands. The enemy didn't fight to win. They fought to bleed us dry. Every yard of ground costing another friend, another scream, another soul. That first night, when the sun finally died and the heat gave way to darkness, something shifted. We expected relief, a chance to breathe. Instead, the jungle came alive. Cicadas shrieked so loud it sounded like whispers in the trees. Every branch snapping made us raise our rifles. Some swore they saw shapes moving in the shadows, not Japanese, but something darker, figures that stood too still, watching. I laughed it off at first, tried to keep the guys calm. Just nerves, I told them. Just jungle tricks. But then Miller, one of the younger Marines, whispered to me, "Sarge, do you hear it too?" Someone crying. I strained my ears. Through the insect chorus, through the distant crack of rifles, I thought I caught it. A soft, broken sob, like a woman mourning. It drifted through the trees, closer then gone. We were alone out there. There were no women on Peleliu. The crying came again later, and this time more men heard it. Some said it was the wind. Others said it was the island itself, grieving. But by morning, Miller was gone. No shots, no struggle, no sign of him. His rifle lay in the dirt where he'd sat. The officers told us he'd wandered off, maybe deserted, maybe got lost and picked off by Japanese snipers. But I knew Miller. He was scared, sure, but he wasn't the type to just walk away. And even if he had, how did he do it without making a sound? That day, we pressed forward toward the ridges. The cave spat fire at us. We blasted flamethrowers into the openings. The heat so intense it peeled the skin off men hiding too close. The screams that came out of those caves didn't sound human anymore. High, shrill, almost animal. Some guys cheered, others puked, but I just stared at the black smoke curling from the stone. It smelled like burned meat. By nightfall, we set up near a ridge. The ground was slick with blood, ours and theirs. I tried to close my eyes, but the jungle never slept. Somewhere out there, something scraped against rock, a hollow, grinding sound. Then came the crying again, louder this time, closer. I grabbed 2 men and went to check. The moonlight cut through the trees just enough to show the coral ground, pitted with shell holes. We followed the sound until it stopped. Silence. Then, rocks shifting above us. I swung my rifle upward, just in time to see a figure duck back into a cave. We fired. The muzzle flashes lit up the trees, echoing into the dark. But when we checked the cave, it was empty. No body, no blood. Just the smell of earth, and something older, like decay that had seeped into the stone itself. One of the men muttered, "This island ain't right. It's cursed." I wanted to tell him he was wrong, that curses weren't real. But when I closed my eyes again, I saw Miller's empty spot, heard the cries echoing inside my skull. And I wondered, were we really fighting men in those caves, or something the island had kept hidden long before we came ashore? The next morning, before the sun rose, another man was missing. And that was only the beginning. The second morning on Peleliu began with silence. Not peace, but the kind of silence that feels staged, like the island was holding its breath. We were down 2 men already. Miller had vanished, and now Corporal Hayes was gone too. No blood, No tracks, nothing but his helmet lying in the sand. The officers barked at us to stay focused, that the fight ahead would be worse than what we'd seen. But every one of us felt it. Peleliu wasn't just killing us, it was swallowing us. We pushed toward Bloody Nose Ridge, a jagged rise of coral that looked like the teeth of some massive animal. That's where the Japanese had dug in deepest. The ridges were riddled with caves and tunnels, snipers hidden in holes so small you wouldn't believe a man could fit inside. They waited, invisible, until one of us moved into their sights. Then a shot. One man down. Another scream. And the jungle swallowed the sound like it had been expecting it. I remember Private Russo stumbling, clutching his chest. The bullet tore through him clean, but before we could drag him back, another shot hit his throat. He dropped, twitching in the coral dust, eyes wide and staring at nothing. We hit the dirt, rifles ready, but we couldn't see the shooter. Just a ridge, silent, watching. "Goddamn ghosts," someone whispered. And for a moment, it did feel like that. Like we weren't fighting soldiers, but shadows. By noon, the heat was unbearable. The sun baked the coral until it burned our hands. Canteens emptied too fast, and every drop of water tasted like metal. Men licked the condensation off their helmets. Some chewed coral just to trick their bodies into thinking they were drinking. The air shimmered. That's when I saw them, or thought I did. Figures on the ridge, standing in the heat haze. At first I thought it was Japanese soldiers, but they didn't move. They just stood, black silhouettes against the blinding white sky. And then, as the haze shifted, they were gone. Hallucinations, I told myself. Just heat stroke. But when I looked at the men around me, I saw the same terror in their eyes. They'd seen them too. We dug in that night, near the base of the ridge. The flamethrower teams went to work, hosing fire into the caves, the roar like a jet engine, the flames crawling across the rock. Men screamed inside. Japanese, sure, but the sound wasn't right. It wasn't just pain. It was fury, like the island itself was howling at us. Afterward, when the flames died, the caves didn't look burned out. They looked darker, deeper, like the fire hadn't touched them at all. We lost 2 more men in the night. No shots, no sign of struggle, just gone. Their foxholes empty at dawn. I remember staring at the prints in the sand where they'd lain. It looked like they just stood up and walked away. But walked where? Into the caves, into the jungle, or somewhere else entirely. That night, I couldn't sleep. The jungle pulsed with sound, the screech of insects, the rustle of unseen animals. But underneath it, there was something else. A low hum, almost like chanting, rising and falling with the wind. I followed it with my ears, and it seemed to come from the ridge itself, from inside the rock. I pressed my ear to the ground, and I swear to God, I felt something moving below us. By the 3rd week, men weren't just dying, they were breaking. Private Lopez started scratching at his arms until they bled, swearing there were bugs crawling under his skin. Sergeant Wallace refused to leave his hole, rocking back and forth, whispering prayers through cracked lips. And then there was Sergeant Calloway. One night he stood up, calm as if he'd heard someone call his name, and walked straight toward the ridge. We shouted for him, but he didn't look back. He just kept walking, rifle dangling at his side, until the dark swallowed him. We never saw him again. By then, even the officers stopped pretending this was just battle fatigue. They didn't say it out loud, but you could see it in their eyes. The island was breaking us, pulling us apart piece by piece. On the 31st day, during a push up the ridge, we broke through a cave entrance larger than the rest. The stench hit us first, rotting flesh, burned meat, something chemical. Inside, the walls were black, but not from soot. They were slick, almost wet, and the air was cold despite the heat outside. We swept the cave with flashlights. For a moment, I thought the walls were covered in vines. But as the light steadied, I realized they weren't vines at all. They were bones. Human bones, cemented into the stone, hundreds of them. American, Japanese, God knows who else. Someone whispered, "This place ain't a battlefield. It's a grave." That night, the crying came again. Only this time, it wasn't far away. It was right outside our camp, and every man heard it. The crying outside our camp froze us in place. Every man clutched his rifle, staring into the jungle. It wasn't just a sound anymore. It was a presence drifting between the trees, slipping through the dark like smoke. Some swore it was a woman's voice, others said a child. All I knew was that it crawled under my skin, set my teeth on edge, and made me feel like the ground beneath us wasn't solid anymore. We didn't sleep that night. Every snap of a branch, every gust of wind, made someone fire into the dark. By morning, we'd wasted nearly half our ammunition shooting at nothing. But not everyone thought it was nothing. Private Dolan, his eyes bloodshot and wild, whispered that it was the island calling to us, one by one. He said Peleliu was feeding, and we were the meat. We laughed at him then, nervous laughter, but deep down, no one truly disagreed. The next push-up Bloody Nose Ridge was worse than anything before. The Japanese weren't just entrenched, they were invisible. You could walk past a hole and not see the soldier inside until he was already firing. They knew the tunnels like veins, slipping through unseen passages, popping up behind us when we thought we had cleared an area. Flamethrowers roared, grenades thundered, rifles cracked until our shoulders ached. The ridge drank our blood and gave us nothing in return. I remember crawling up a slope slick with mud and entrails. When I looked down, I saw Sergeant Wallace, the one who had been praying nonstop, lying with his face pressed into the muck. His lips still moved, whispering words I couldn't hear, but his chest had been ripped open. His heart was gone. The medics said a shell must have done it, but there was no shrapnel, no blast marks, just emptiness where his heart should have been. And then I saw the prints. Small, bare footprints pressed into the mud, circling his body. Not Japanese boots, not Marine boots. Bare, like a child's. I didn't tell the others. Some things were better left unsaid. That night, rain poured in sheets. It should have cooled the island, but it didn't. It only made the air thicker, heavier. The jungle steamed, and the ground turned to slime. We huddled in our foxholes, soaked to the bone, waiting. I closed my eyes for just a second, and when I opened them, someone was standing at the edge of my hole. At first I thought it was Dolan, come to whisper more madness. But when lightning flashed, I saw her. A girl. Thin, pale, hair plastered to her face with rain. She couldn't have been more than 12. She stood barefoot in the mud, her eyes wide and black, her mouth hanging open in a silent scream. I scrambled, rifle up, shouting, but when lightning cracked again, she was gone. The men said I was dreaming, hallucinating. But then they found Dolan the next morning. His throat was slit from ear to ear and carved into the coral beside him, with something sharp and deliberate, was a single word. Mine. The officers didn't let us speak of it. They said it was Japanese psychological warfare, tricks to scare us, maybe even some local superstition. But how did they explain the footprints? The voices? The way men were disappearing without a trace? Peleliu was eating us alive. Weeks passed. Days bled into nights, nights into days. The ridge never let us rest. The crying became constant, sometimes joined by laughter, high and thin, echoing from the caves. Some men stuffed cloth in their ears just to try and block it out. Others begged for transfer, for anything but another night here. But there was no transfer, no escape. One evening, after another failed push, I caught Private McKenna staring at the ridge. His lips moved, but no sound came out. I tapped his shoulder, asked him what he was saying. He didn't answer, just kept staring. Finally, I leaned close. He was repeating a word over and over. The same word we'd seen carved into the stone. Mine, mine, mine. He didn't even flinch when I shook him. His eyes were empty, glassy. By morning, he was gone. His rifle, his helmet, everything left behind, except for the word, scratched into the dirt where he'd sat. We were breaking apart, not from bullets, not from mortars, but from something older, something that had been waiting in the coral long before we landed. On the 40th night, the jungle fell silent again. No insects, no wind, nothing but the sound of our own breathing. That's when the ridge lit up, not from gunfire, not from lightning, but from inside. A faint glow seeped from the caves, pale and sickly, like moonlight bleeding out of the stone. Men cursed, crossed themselves, some even prayed. I couldn't move. My legs were locked, and then I heard it. The sobbing, the laughter, the whispers, all at once, rising from the caves in a single voice. Not Japanese, not human. It said my name. We went into the caves at noon because daylight felt like armor. It wasn't. The sun only made the entrance look harmless, A crooked mouth in the ridge with a lip of shattered coral and scorched stone. Inside, the air changed. Hot outside, cold within. My breath fogged. The switch was so sudden it felt like stepping through skin. "Stack up," I whispered. The flamethrower man, Burroughs, nodded, the tank on his back hissing softly. We had 2 riflemen, 1 bar, and a runner who couldn't stop shaking. The runner kept tapping the St. Christopher medal on his chest, a nervous metronome. 50 feet in, sound died. Our boots should have scraped rock. They didn't. Our gear should have clacked. It didn't. Even the drip of water came in little swallowed syllables, like the cave was chewing the noise. Burroughs whispered, "Say the word." I gave him a nod. Fire roared, a white tongue licking the tunnel. Heat washed over us. Shadows folded away like paper. And there, just beyond the curve, figures. For one electric second, I saw 3 men crouched behind a low wall of stone. Japanese helmets. Rifles up. Contact left. The bargainer hissed, and we opened up. Except the figures didn't flinch. The bullets sparked, ricocheted. Burroughs blasted again, flame flooding the alcove. The men didn't move, because they weren't men. Just helmets and uniforms mortared into the wall, fused in place. The heat peeled the cloth, and under its skulls. Some rounded, some long. Too many. The runner gagged. The metal clicked faster. "They cemented them," he said. "They didn't bury their dead. They kept them in the walls." "Move," I said, though my voice came from far away. The tunnel forked. Left fell deeper, a throat swallowing light. Right climbed. A breeze came from the right, salt, wet moss, gun oil, smoke, every smell of the island in one breath. We chose the right. Survival isn't courage most days. It's choosing whichever way has air. We found a room. Low ceiling, slick floor. The beam of my flashlight cut across carved markings, shallow lines scoring the limestone. At first I thought they were tally marks. Then I saw the curves and hooks, the little claws of script I didn't recognize. Not Japanese. Not American. Older. The runner traced a symbol with his finger. "Don't," I snapped, grabbing his wrist. His skin felt like ice. He stared at me over the circle he'd outlined. Inside the circle, thin scratches spiraled inward, an eye without a pupil. My light shook. The spiral seemed to move. Burroughs said, "You hear that?" We all did. A breath, though not human. It sounded like a lung that wasn't built for air, pulling anyway. In, out, from the rock. The bargainer clicked his safety off. "This is wrong," he said, and I didn't disagree. We backed out. The way we come felt longer now. The air got colder, then colder still. Frost bloomed on the mouth of the runner's canteen. He started to hum, a low, tuneless thread. "What are you humming?" I asked. He didn't answer. "Kid," I said, "try his name, Anders." The hum got louder. He stared straight ahead, eyes reflecting my beam like an animal's. I touched his shoulder and felt the tremor roll through him, like a wire under tension. "It's learning our names," he said, "so it can keep them." He lifted the metal and bit down on it until his teeth squealed on metal. We hit the entrance blind with sun and stumbled out in a heat that punched the breath out of us. Outside, the company was a torn page, scattered men, 2 stretchers, a corpseman pounding a chest. Someone had strung ponchos for shade. The air stank of cordite and latrines. I asked for a sitrep. The lieutenant's pupils were pinpricks. "Counterpunch from the left," he said. "We lost Cooper, McKenna, and," he faltered, swallowed, "and Dolan again." I stared. "Dolan's dead." The lieutenant blinked as if I'd told him a joke with a bad ending. "They pulled his tags this morning," he said. "But a runner swears he saw Dolan walking along the ridge an hour ago. Barefoot, not bleeding." Burroughs took off his mask, sweat cutting white roads in his soot. "Maybe the island reissues people," he said. No one laughed. We set a perimeter and tried to eat. The rations tasted like wet cardboard. I forced down 3 bites and stopped. The stew smell coming from the cave had followed us out. Or maybe it lived in my nose now. I drank warm water, and it tasted like a dead battery. If you heard your name, spoke in your own voice, from a dark hole in a cursed island, would you answer it? Or would you pour fire in until your arms shook? Don't answer out loud. Find your own rule and nail it to your ribs. We did. Sundown. Cicada started, then stopped all at once. The quiet felt like a tarp. Men checked rifles, then checked them again. We strung tripwires with flares between coral teeth. I told the watch to wake me at midnight. They woke me at 10, faces pale. Something's in the wire. I crawled to the edge with 2 others. The trip flares hadn't popped. The wire quivered like a plucked string. I flicked my light, quick. The beam skated over coral, sand, a torn boot, small footprints. Bare. Heel toe. A child's gait. The print stopped to the wire and didn't resume on our side. Animals. One of the men said too quickly. What kind? The other muttered. I aimed the light lower, raking it slow. The impressions were clean. Each toe print had a tiny crescent dent at the tip, as if the toes were sharper than they should be. Midnight, the crying started again, right beside my ear, though no one was near. A girl's voice, breathless, broken. Please, she whispered, it hurts. I turned my head and the sound moved with me, always beside, never in front. I sat very still. I thought about the marks in the cave, about the spiral eye. I thought about the word gouged into coral. Mine. I grabbed the runner's sleeve. Anders, I said softly. Stay with me. His head turned a fraction. His eyes didn't. They locked on the dark line of the ridge where the cave mouth was just a blacker black. His lips moved. I leaned closer. He said, she doesn't want the island. She wants the refrigerator. Say again. The box. Cold. The cold makes you quiet. She likes quiet. She lives in the quiet. He was shivering though sweat ran like rain down his neck. His teeth clicked on the metal again. He whispered, she's older than the caves. They cut the caves into her. Dawn bled out of the sea like a wound. Men stood slow, bones creaking. We did the head count that always made the stomach hollow. 1, 2, 3, always waiting for which number wouldn't answer. Everyone was there, until I noticed Anders's rifle propped against a root, webbing still looped on the butt, metal dangling from the sling. No Anders. No footprints leaving. Nothing but the rifle and the imprint of where he'd been sitting. I picked up the metal. Warm. The chain snapped in my fingers. We moved to the airfield for resupply, a flat shimmer of heat that refracted men into wobbly ghosts. A squad from another company shuffled past, faces windburned, eyes hooded. One of them did a double take and raised a hand. Calloway. I stopped. Sergeant Calloway had walked into the ridge 2 weeks earlier, calm as a priest. I turned. A man in our line, helmet low, chin unshaven, kept walking. He didn't look at the other squad. He didn't look at me. He just followed our column with that special Dead Man's Gate soldiers get when they're moving, because moving is the only choice left. Calloway, the other squad's man said, voice cracking. You hear me? The man in our line didn't turn, didn't blink. He moved like a needle pulled on a thread. I stepped in front of him. Sarge. He stopped, lifted his head. Nothing in his eyes. Not rage. Not relief. Nothing. He opened his mouth, and a long, slow breath came out, the same non-air sound from the cave. In out. In out. He closed his mouth again and walked around me without touching. Burroughs said, nope, and made the sign of the cross with a flamethrower wand. We didn't bury Calloway because I'm not sure you can bury a hole in the world. That evening, I took 3 men back to the cave. Stupid. Necessary. Both can be true. We carried extra flares and a coil of comm wire. I tied the wire around my waist and around Burroughs's, like children on a frozen pond. If the island wanted to swallow us, it'd have to take us in pairs. We reached the room with the eye. The spiral didn't move this time. My hands did. I realized I was tracing it with my light, round and round. I forced the beam away and swung it low. Bones piled in the corners, but they weren't thrown there. They were stacked, arranged in alternating patterns. Long bone, short bone, skull, like someone had been building with them. What do you want? I asked the room before I could stop myself. I don't know why I expected an answer. I got one. Not words. A pressure. The sense of a hand against the back of my neck, gentle, proprietary, same as a mother guiding a child across a street. The breath came again, in, out. It matched my own until I couldn't tell which lungs were doing the work. If something claimed this place, if it grew fat on quiet and cold and names carved into stone, what would you do? Light it up? Speak to it. Say please. Burroughs thumbed the igniter. Fire shook itself awake. The room went from night to noon. Heat blew our helmets back. Sweat flashed to steam. The eye blackened. The breath hitched, faltered, then came back, deeper. The flame died. "Why'd you stop?" I shouted. Burroughs didn't move. His hands were locked around the wand, knuckles white. His head tilted, listening to something I couldn't hear. The calm wire tugged tight at my waist. He was leaning forward, gentle as sleepwalking. I hauled back, felt him resist, felt something else resist me through him. A heavier body bridged across our two spines. "Burroughs," I said, low and even. "She doesn't want fire." He blinked, and the wire went slack. The wand dropped, clanged on rock. We left the cave fast. No formation, no pride. Every man understanding the only tactic that mattered. Don't give it your name. At the entrance, the air flipped back to hot. The jungle roared to life like someone turned up a dial. We hit the sunlight and didn't stop until the ridge was a scar behind us. Night felt like it always did. Too fast. I lay awake with my helmet on my chest, listening to the breath that wasn't wind move through the island. When the crying started, it wasn't a girl this time. It was my voice, and it was coming from inside, the metal clenched in my fist. We went back at dusk because the island liked to take at night. If we were going to take anything back, we had to meet it on its hour. I chose 4. Burroughs with the flame, the barman, a quiet kid named Estes who could tie knots in the dark, and me. I wrote our names on a scrap of ration box and stuck it in my pocket. Not because I wanted to remember, because I wanted to know what might be missing when we came out. We didn't brief it like a mission. We spoke like men about to step under ice. "Rule 1, I said, wrapping the comm wire around each of our waists. "No one goes alone. If something asks, you don't answer. Not even if it sounds like me." I held up the street Christopher medal I'd found where Anders vanished. "If you hear your name, bite down on metal. Keep your mouth busy." Burroughs smirked at that, a little crooked line of courage. "And if she asks what we want?" "Nothing," I said. "We don't want. We take." We slid into the ridge while the sun went brittle and red. Heat snapped off our backs. Cold caught us by the chest. The breath started almost immediately in, out, as if the cave had been waiting with lungs full. "Count," I whispered. "1, said Burroughs. 2, the bar. 3, Estes. 4, I said. The cave repeated it in a sigh. Phosphor. I told myself it was echo. I told myself a lot of things. We passed the wall where helmets were mortared over skulls. Their eye sockets glittered with salt. A fly crawled out of one and froze in the cold, tiny legs stuttering. I kept my light low to avoid the spiral eye. The comm wire tugged and snaked as we moved. Our little proof that we were still chained to each other and not to something older. At the first chamber, the markings were clearer. Not just scratches, letters born wrong. A circle cut by hooks. A line with teeth. Names that weren't ours. The cave, I realized, was a ledger. "Do you hear them?" Estes breathed. I did. Not the crying, whispering, layered a dozen deep, like a crowd in a church too shy to sing. Under it, a thin child's voice counting. Not in English, not in Japanese, but counting. "Flare," I said, and shot one down the left fork. The magnesium flowered white, shadows flinching, bones stacked to waist height, neat like firewood. A dog tag glinted between a pair of femurs. I reached without thinking, and my fingers snapped back like I'd touched a hot stove. "Do not take," the cave said, in my mother's voice. "If a place speaks with someone you loved, would you trust it for a second? Or would you hate it for knowing the timbre of that throat?" We took the other fork. The chamber with the spiral was different now. The eye was darker, edges glazed as if kissed by heat. In the black center, moisture gleamed, an iris of condensation. It looked awake. "This is where she listens," Burroughs said. "Then we do this here," I answered, and knelt to my pocket. I pulled the ration scrap and the pencil stub. I wrote 5 words, one under the other, sharp enough to cut paper. Miller, Hayes, Anders, Calloway, Dolan. Names the island had already claimed. Names she was hoarding. I pressed the list flat to the stone with my palm. "You bargaining now," the barman murmured. "If she keeps names," I said, "maybe she deals in them." "What do we trade?" Estes whispered. "Mine," I said. I laid my dog tags on the scrap. The breath deepened. A drop gathered at the spiral center and ran inward instead of out. The wire around our waists went tight, as if something had leaned its weight on all 4 of us at once. Burroughs hissed through his teeth. She likes that. Shut up, I said softly. Listen. A sound rose, like wet paper tearing, and then footsteps, small and bare, came from behind the spiral. Impossible because the wall was stone. Undeniable because we felt the vibrations in our knees. A girl's outline brightened in our lights, and then wasn't a girl at all, just the possibility of one. The height, the tilt of a head, a gap where a mouth could open and claim. Names for names, I said to the dark. You took ours. Give them back. Silence. Then the cave spoke in a voice I'd only ever heard once. Corporal Hayes, laughing at a joke he hadn't finished telling because the shell took him midward. Too late, it said brightly, like a friend arriving with beer. The breath blew over the scrap, and my tags rang a silver note. I swallowed the taste of iron. Then take this one and let the rest go. I tapped the metal with one finger. Me for them. The wire jerked. Burroughs nearly fell. Sarge. Quiet. The spiral's moisture pooled, and I smelled something sudden and precise. Hospital ether, the clean before the cut. A hand I couldn't see slid across the back of my neck, cool and proprietary. My name came back to me, not said, but measured. Every letter weighed like a coin to see if it was counterfeit. And that's when I lied. I didn't give the island the name my mother had put in my ears. I gave it the one the war had built, a nickname the platoon used, a string of sounds that wasn't mine until men decided it was. I felt the hand hesitate, then settle, tricked by the weight. Behind me, the barman's breath stuttered. The whisper crowd got louder. The ledger wall clicked like an abacus someone was sliding too fast. Flame, I said to Burroughs without turning. He didn't ask why. The wand spat fire. Heat flash-boiled the condensation in the spiral. It screamed without voice, a kettle of cold things. The breath faltered. The little footsteps stumbled. Now, I said, and tore the tags away. The chain cut my skin. We ran the comm wire to its end. Out, out, out. Feet skating on slick stone. The cave bucked, the ground pitching like a boat. Estes fell. The wire saved him, dragged him against a rock, his knee cracking. He didn't scream. He was smart. He bit the metal. The passage behind us filled with sound. Hayes's laugh, Miller's singing, Anders's hum, Dolan's Jersey curse, Calloway's slow breath. All the men we were owed, braided into a rope the island tried to throw around our ankles. We jumped it. We kept going. The mouth of the cave yawned ahead and closed. Not stone, not earth, dark like a curtain pulled. The breath rushed in as if the island had decided to inhale all at once and hold us forever in the cold half of its lung. What now? Burroughs demanded, panic bright as a flare. Names, I said. Give them back. I dropped the list. It fluttered, then lay perfectly still on the wet rock, as if magnetized. I dug in my pocket, found the other scrap I had folded so small it was a pellet. I unfolded it with shaking fingers. Not ours. Theirs. Japanese names I'd copied from a helmet liner, from a photograph in a wallet pulled off a corpse whose face I couldn't look at. Men who had laughed, written, loved. Men the island owned by geography, if nothing else. Trade, I said to the dark. Mine's counterfeit. These are real. Silence thickened until the blood in my ears was the only sound. Then the wire went slack, a signal that hurt. Pressure lifted off our spines, the hand on my neck letting go in a gesture so human it made me want to be sick. The dark at the entrance thinned by degrees. Not all at once. Piece by piece, as if someone unstitched night with a long needle. We spilled into heat. The jungle crashed back on. Cicadas sawing, parrots heckling, a shell whining distant. Burroughs rolled on his back and laughed wetly, a laugh that wasn't relief. The barman kissed the ground. Estes tried to stand and sat instead, his knee puffing under his pants like a second kneecap. We did the thing you do when you don't believe in miracles but count them anyway. We turned, breath held, to see who came out behind us. A shape appeared in the mouth, barefoot, small. It took one step into the light and resolved into a boy in a ragged uniform blouse with kanji scrawled across the pocket. He blinked, bewildered, looked at the trees like he'd never seen them after dark, and smiled. Not at us. At the sun. Go, I told him, and he did, running without looking back. Not a threat, not a ghost, just something we'd freed by accident or design. Not ours, the barman said, trying not to sound disappointed. We didn't bargain for hours, I said. We bargained for names. Night came fast, mean as always. We limped to the perimeter, mouths salty with the old taste of living. I slept with the metal in my fist, and woke with its imprint in my palm like a brand. Spiral lines etched under the skin, not on it. They haven't faded. Did we get our men back? Not in any way you could count. But the island gave us something. A slackening, a mercy measured in inches. The crying stopped for 3 nights. The missing stopped for a week. We took the ridge yard by yard and left more of ourselves there than we brought home. I left Peleliu with a metal burn in my hand and a breath in my chest that wasn't mine. Some mornings I wake and the room is cold in July, and I hear the counting start again from somewhere behind the wall. 1, 2, 3. When it reaches 4, I bite down on metal and don't answer. Because I lied to the island once, and it took the lie like truth. Because it still knows the name I didn't give it. Because on some nights, when the world is very quiet, I can feel a cool hand on the back of my neck, guiding me gently toward the dark, the way a mother leads a child across the street. And because I made a bargain in a place that keeps ledgers forever.